settings.
हाँ.
Because otherwise it creates some. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you see? And is the video there? I mean, can you see the video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, all right. Okay, before I start, I want to tell you that tomorrow I will be taking class from 11:15, and I'll continue the class beyond 12:15 because you will not be having your STQM class tomorrow, and both on Thursday and Friday. So Thursday and Friday, instead of your STQM class, I will take the class. And because we are finishing around 12:20, maybe if you want, we can have a break of 5 minutes, and then after that I can start the next class. Or if it's not required, we won't have the break. All right, so let me go back to what I was doing last time. So I hope all of you have got time. I mean, we'll get time now this week because your exams are over, and we will get time to now read your MMP2, especially the tensor part, which we have been doing. So as I said, it won't be very useful unless you actually work out all those exercises which I have given you and practice the expressions, and especially how to deal and manipulate these summation conventions. So firstly, you must understand what the summation means, what each expression means, and then how we can use this. All right. So last time I introduced two tensors which we will often have reason to use, or which we'll find interesting to use. And one was the delta tensor or delta ij, which was defined like this. And I'm calling it as a tensor because what I showed you last time was that this particular object transforms like a second rank tensor. It's a symmetric tensor. And another thing which you can note about this particular object is that the components are independent about the coordinate axis. Or in other words, it is independent of what basis you choose. And it remains, the values of the component remain the same in all cases. And again, our basis transformations are only rotation transformations. And for now, we are also restricting ourselves to those rotation transformations where the determinant of R is +1. Okay. Then later I introduced this other tensor, epsilon ijk. And what we saw was that epsilon ijk takes a value. So epsilon 1, 2, 3 equal to +1. And if you make an odd permutation of this now from 1 to 3, then you will get -1. And even number of permutations of 1, 2, 3 will lead to +1. And epsilon ijk by definition then is 0 if any of the two indices are same. Because if you have any other kind of permutation, then the value is identically equal to 0. If any two indices are same. And from the definition of epsilon ijk, you can also see that epsilon ijk is equal to minus epsilon jik. That means if I exchange the first two indices, then it's antisymmetric. In fact, if I exchange ijk, any two indices, it is antisymmetric. So here I have exchanged these first and the third. And similarly, epsilon ijk will be equal to minus epsilon ik. So this goes by the definition. So this is actually sometimes called a totally antisymmetric object. Right now, please tell me. Yes? Pardon? Huh?
अगं पण आई एवढी केस तर राहतात का डोक्याला आणि एवढे 400 आणि 500 रुपये द्यायचे तिथं.
Yeah? What is the question? Somebody wanted to ask a question and somebody was saying something I don't understand. 400-500 rupiah.
Ma'am, someone accidentally unmuted. You may continue.
Okay, fine. All right. So what I want to now show you is that this object, the way we defined it, I've written down the precise definition last time, so I'm not writing it again. So this object, which is, you can see, has 3 indices or 3 subscripts. So therefore there are 27 components, but of which we saw last time there are only 6 which are non-zero, all the rest are 0. And what I want to show you is this 27 component object really transforms like a tensor of rank 3. Okay, and to that end, what I was doing last time, that's where I stopped. I said that let's consider a 3 by 3 matrix. So let me, I have a matrix which is, say, this. So in order to demonstrate for you that this transforms like a third rank tensor, I'm going to first show you some of the properties of this Levi-Civita symbol. So let's consider an arbitrary 3 by 3 matrix A. And by definition, you know that determinant of A. So I wrote this down like this: A11, A22. All right. So this is by definition the determinant. I've just written it down very explicitly. Now notice each expression here. So if you look at the first subscript in each of these, so there are 3 A's in each of these terms. And if you look at the first subscript for each of the A's, so here you have A1, 2, 3. And in this case, the second one also has 1, 2, 3. Similarly, you look at this 1, 2, 3. So if I just look at the first subscript, in each of these terms, you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Similarly, here 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if you look at the second subscript, now you'll see a 1, 2, 3 here. Then I have a 1, 3, 2. Then I have 2, 1, 3. Then 2, 3, 1. Then here I have 3, 1, 2 and 3, 2, 1. And also you can see that whenever I have, so if I look at, so the first subscript in each of these, in all the A's is the same, 1, 2, 3. And if you look at the second subscript, it's really like a permutation of 1, 2, 3. So if I have 1, 2, 3, then I have here 1, 3, 2. So I permuted 2 and 3 here. And you can also see that every time I have an odd permutation of 1, 2, 3, I get one extra minus sign here in the term, in the coefficient. So from here 1, 2, 3, I went to 1, 3, 2. In the second subscript, I get a minus sign. From here, if I start 1, 2, 3, in the second subscript, I go to 2, 1, 3. So I've exchanged these two and I get a minus sign. But if I go to 2, 3, 1, from 1, 2, 3, so in that I have done 2 permutations, so I still get a plus sign. So you can see that I can write this compactly in this form. So I can use my Levi-Civita symbol, in fact, to write a determinant over 3 by 3 matrix in this very compact form. And again, here I've used the summation convention. So it's a very neat way of doing this. But now I can do a little bit more of manipulation here. See, after all, these are just numbers. So I could have as well written this as A22, A11. So I could have written this in this way. A22, A11, A33. So let me write it in the following way. See here in this last expression here, I have A1I, A2J, A3K, epsilon ijk. And the dummy indices are I, J and K. All these are summed over. Now whether I call the dummy index I here or J here, it doesn't matter. I could have as well called this as J and call this as I and equivalently change this here. Okay, so I could also write this in the following way, that this is equal to, See, this is where you will find that this kind of manipulation is very, very useful often. So once I have this, I can write this dummy index because whether I call that as an I or a j, it doesn't matter. It's simply a summation index. So I write this as 2i a3k. But then in that case, I must also change here because you know that epsilon ijk is antisymmetric. So I can't write this now as ij here. I have to write it as j because the first index, whatever appears here with the one term, that is one which should come first here. So I can write this as epsilon jik. So going from here to here, all I have done is called, instead of calling this as I have called this as j and called this as I. And just took the first order in the same order. But now I use the fact that epsilon jik is nothing but minus epsilon ijk. So I will write this as minus 1j alright. This is how I will write this. And then of course you know that matrix multiply, these are numbers only, so I can commute them because these are now elements. I'll write this like this. Alright. So what you can see is that when I had 1i, 2j, 3k, I got here epsilon ijk, but now when I have here 2i, 1j, so it's like I have permuted now these 1, 2, 3 to 2, 1, 3. And when I permuted these first indices now, I get an extra minus sign. I've done one permutation, so it's an odd permutation, I get an extra minus sign. So I could write this in the following way. So let me do one more manipulation here. That taking care of that minus sign, I will introduce epsilon 2, 3. Actually, not 2, 3, 1, sorry, 2, 1. Because it's in this order. Okay, so I write this, for example, as epsilon 1, 2, 3. That is like redundant, but here I'm adding this. Okay, so more generally, I can write my determinant of A in the following way. So what you can again see is that the first indices, I mean, if you look at this expression, the first indices, all the first indices must be different. So more generally, I can write my determinant A in the following way: ALI, AMJ, ANK into epsilon IJK, epsilon KM. Okay. So what this epsilon ijk will ensure is that the second subscripts in each of these A's are different, because otherwise you will get identically 0. This second epsilon will ensure that the first subscripts L, M, N, they are different, otherwise this expression will become 0. And further, that if I permute in the first two indices, then I will get a minus sign, as I should get here. If I make an odd permutation in the second indices, then again I will get a minus sign. Okay. And further, what you can see then is now okay, maybe I should do this way. All right, maybe I should write it in. I just want to say here that there is no summation here. No, okay, I want to express here that there is no summation over L, M, N. See, the way I have written here, if I put M, N, and it might look like a summation here, but I'm not making any summation because you can see that there is no summation. If I fix here, you look at this expression, 1i, the summation is only over the second indices. And this one which I put is simply that it is adding that extra minus sign, that's all. Okay, there is no summation, otherwise I'll get a redundant answer. So please keep that in mind. Or alternately, if I take from here now, so I have got determinant of A, so just maybe from this expression you can see, I have here, I had epsilon 213, then A2I, A1J, A3K, epsilon ij. So the summation is only over ijk's. So this again, let me multiply now with epsilon 213 on both sides. Then I'm going to get epsilon 213 times determinant of A will be equal to. Now epsilon 213 is minus 1, but if I multiply with another minus 1, I'll get a plus 1. So I'm simply going to get here A2i, A1j, A3. So I do the same thing for this arbitrary epsilon element, and what I will get is epsilon element determinant of A. So I'm doing from here now. So this implies this is equal to ALI, AMG, ANA, epsilon. Okay. So most generally we have this identity. And again, this epsilon element will tell you that my first indices LMN must be different. I mean, I have to have some permutation of 1, 2, 3 here. I can't get the same two indices. Okay, this in fact we can generalize this to any nth order determinant, but let me just leave it here for this. So again, I want to emphasize when I wrote this expression, I don't have a summation over LMN. So this is simply then multiplying that particular value. Now let us consider, so I have this general identity here. So if I take L equal to 1, M equal to 2 and 3, then in that case I'll get plus here. So I'll simply get determinant A equal to A1i, A2j, A3k, epsilon ijk, so on. Alright, now suppose your A equal to R, or rotation matrix. Alright, then from here what do I get? It tells me then that epsilon element determinant of R should be equal to ANI, AMJ. So instead of A we have R. Our rotation matrix, the matrix which takes you from basis B to basis V prime, R in K epsilon ij. Okay, this is what you get. But what is determinant of R? In our case, what is the determinant of the rotation matrix?
Plus minus 1.
But we have restricted ourselves now to the case only when determinant of R is plus 1. So I am considering only that case now. So when determinant R equal to plus 1, then what this tells me is that epsilon LMN equal to RLI, RMJ, RMK, epsilon RG. I get this identity here. Okay. So what we have therefore got is this identity for the epsilon object, for the Levi-Civita symbol. Now if I go back, what is it that I wanted to show? I wanted to show that epsilon transforms like a third rank tensor. Now how does one demonstrate that something is a third rank tensor? Okay, so what I have to show is that epsilon prime ijk equal to RIL, RJM, RKN, epsilon MMN. This is what I need to show. Okay? Because if I can show that with respect to basis, the transformed epsilon transforms like this, then in that case, I know that my epsilon behaves like a third rank tensor. I have 3 R's here. Okay. By definition, now we also know that, so by definition, you know that epsilon prime ijk is the same as epsilon ijk. See, that is the way we defined epsilon. It was independent of the basis. Because epsilon ijk was defined as equal to plus 1 if ijk equal to an even permutation of 1, 2, 3. And it is equal to minus 1 if it's an odd permutation of 1, 2, 3. And it is 0 otherwise. So that doesn't depend whether you've chosen the basis B or whether you've chosen the basis B prime. So epsilon prime ijk is the same as this. Alright? That's by definition. So what therefore you have is that epsilon prime ijk, which is equal to epsilon ijk. But you know now that from this identity now, epsilon ijk is equal to, so I'm going to use this now in this form, RIL. So again, I'm writing it like this because you have to see that I can just put now, instead of putting LM in here, I put IJK. So I just put IL like this, ILJM RK in epsilon LM. Because of this identity, okay? And therefore I'm done. So therefore this tells you that epsilon transforms like a rank 3 tensor. So therefore this epsilon ijk, we will call this as a Levi-Civita tensor now. It's a third rank tensor. Okay. And again, it has the property that its components are completely independent of which coordinate axis you have chosen. And again, I want to emphasize that I have taken rotation transformations with determinant r equal to +1. So what we have got is therefore that we have got these two nice objects, or we've introduced these two objects, delta and epsilon, whose components do not depend upon the basis you have chosen. So I have therefore used or introduced these two objects, delta ij and this epsilon ijk. This is a tensor of rank 3 and this is a rank 2 tensor, both of which have components which do not depend upon which basis you have chosen. And further what you can see is that delta ij equal to delta ji. So what kind of a tensor is this? Second rank. What kind of a second rank tensor is this? And the exchange of these two indices, delta ij and I and j, you're getting the same thing. So what would you call such a tensor?
Symmetric.
Yeah, so it is a symmetric second rank tensor. On the other hand, you find that epsilon ijk equal to minus epsilon jik equal to minus of epsilon k ji minus of ikj and so on. So it is what is known as a totally antisymmetric tensor of rank 3. That means if I exchange any two indices, the totally means that it's not, because it's now a higher than 2 rank, so it is antisymmetric under exchange of not just the first two indices. So if I exchange first two indices, it is antisymmetric, second two it is antisymmetric, or first and third it is antisymmetric. So that's why it's called the totally antisymmetric tensor of rank. So while delta ij is a symmetric tensor of second rank.
To show that epsilon ijk.
Pardon? Pardon?
To show that epsilon ijk is 3 rank tensor, we use rotation matrix. Can we do it for a general matrix?
No, but I mean the way we have defined, how did I define my tensor itself? See, how did I define a tensor? A Cartesian tensor, how did we define? An mth rank tensor, by definition, is something which has, in our case, it has 3 to the power of m components. Okay, in our 3-dimensional space, a mth rank tensor must be something which has 3 to the power of m components. And so if I define, say, I1, so I'll repeat this again. So this is an object which has 3 to the power of m components. 3 because we are considering 3-dimensional space. And then what we will say these components are defined, say, with respect to basis B. Then from basis B, I'm going to another basis B prime through a rotation transformation, because I'm preserving the inner product. So we are considering those transformations. And further, I've also said that I'm restricting those to rigid rotations where determinant of R equal to +1. So then I ask, how does these components change? So again, I will get I1, I2, In. Now with respect to B prime, what we found is that if this is like this, if this is satisfied, okay, if with respect to B prime, so this I'm calling now as prime. So the T prime, which are the components of this matrix, or components of this object with respect to the basis B prime. So I'll put a B prime just as a redundant thing. If it transforms, or if you can relate the components of this T matrix, or not matrix, sorry, this object T with respect to the basis B prime to that of the elements with respect to the basis B in the following way, and where these R's, Ri1, J1, Ri2, J2, and so on, are elements of the rotation matrix, then in that case, I will say that this is a tensor. Then you will say that T is an mth rank tensor. This is by definition. So I cannot put anything else arbitrary here. So this is our Cartesian tensor definition. Okay? Because it will not make any sense for me to talk of any arbitrary matrix here. I'm choosing a particular basis for my coordinate system, then I'm going to another basis for that same coordinate system, and the kind of transformations I'm considering there are these so-called rotation transformations, which leave the inner product unchanged. And also I'm also restricting now to determinant R equal to +1, because you can see that I've chosen that. Then in that case, I will say that these are, if I have some object like this, then I will call that object as a tensor of rank. Okay. Now within that definition, I have demonstrated for you that epsilon transforms like a tensor of rank. So you cannot put any arbitrary matrix here, because that makes no sense at all. Okay. So please keep this in mind. Okay, that what we are actually doing. That's why I've repeated the definition of a tensor again. All right. So to come back to this, so now I've introduced these two objects, one a second rank symmetric second rank tensor, and another the completely antisymmetric third rank tensor. And the interesting part of these two objects is that the components of these two tensors do not depend at all on which basis you have chosen. Okay. Now, before I go a little bit more, before I tell you a little bit more of the properties of this, let me tell you that both these tensors are very useful tensors. See, so for example, if you want the inner product of two vectors, or if I want to consider the inner product of two tensors of rank 1, or two vectors, by definition we know that, so let U and V be two vectors, the inner product of this is given as U1 V1 plus U2 V2 plus U3 V3, which you can write as UI VI, which I can also write it as UI Vj delta Ij. See, what we have done here is basically I've contracted the product of two. In this, if you look at it, so you can think of this as I define Tij, if defining Tij as equal to UI Vj, then this object, UI Vj delta Ij. So if I have Tii, this is nothing but, or if I take Tij delta Ij, then this is equal to UI Vj delta Ij by definition. Okay. But then, because of the fact that delta Ij will be 0 unless I equal to j, this is nothing but Ui Vi. So when I have a delta Ij, what I can do is, because I know by definition that delta Ij will be 0 unless I equal to j, then wherever the j comes, I can just replace that subscript by I subscript. Alright? And if you look at what I've done here, this is nothing but Tii. So basically what we have done is I've used the delta Ij to contract this second rank tensor which I built up from the two first rank tensors UI, U and V. Okay. So the delta ij can be used to contract two indices or two subscripts, because wherever the delta ij comes, then one of the subscripts can be replaced by, so if I have, like in this expression, I have ij, and if I have delta ij here, so either I could have replaced j with I, or I could have replaced I with j here. But it doesn't matter, ui vi is the same as uj vj, because that is again a dummy index. And we already know that if you have contracted two indices here, from a second rank tensor I contracted with two indices, so I'm going to get a scalar quantity, because it will go to an m minus 2th rank tensor. So delta ij is very useful when you really want to contract indices, or when we want to contract tensors. And we'll see more uses of this in just a little while. Now I'll also show you another interesting aspect of epsilon. Now let's see, I have epsilon ijk. It's a third rank tensor. And I multiply with this particular thing, lmn. What will this object be now? Epsilon ijk times epsilon lmn. How will this transform? We have said that this is a third rank tensor. This will also be a third rank tensor. So here I'm now combining two third rank tensors. So how should this transform?
Ma'am, it should transfer like a rank 6 tensor.
Yeah, very good. That's correct. Because what we saw last time is that if I take the if I combine or multiply in quotes outer product of a rank m tensor with that of a rank n tensor, then the resultant object will transform like an m plus nth rank tensor. So in this case, I've combined an mth rank tensor with an nth rank tensor. So this should transform like a, or I will write it like this, transforms like a tensor of rank 6. So you can verify, okay? For yourself, okay? So for the verification, all that you need to do is take the definition and show it. Okay. So let me call this object, whatever object I have here, I call this as Tijk lmn, because it has 6 indices. And this T will transform like a 6th rank tensor. Now what I want to do is, I want to contract here these two indices, k and n. Okay, so I've taken the 6th rank tensor, I want to contract that. So I have Tij k mn. Okay. So that's going to be then by definition epsilon ijk epsilon k m. Agreed? Notice that I've contracted the k and the lth index. Okay. All right. Now, what should this object transform like?
Rank 4 tensor.
It should transform like a rank 4 tensor, which means that whatever is this object on the right hand, this must have only 4 indices, free indices, which will be I, J, M, N. All right. And now my claim to you is that this will be equal to delta I k, delta I m So how would you show this? So my claim is that you have this identity then, or in other words, what I'm telling you is epsilon ijk times epsilon k mn equal to delta im delta jn minus of delta in delta j. Okay, since often you will find that we will be manipulating such kind of terms, it's useful to just check whether such an identity is even correct or not. So the first thing you can see is that this object, whatever you have on your left-hand side, it must be antisymmetric under exchange of Ij, and it must be antisymmetric under exchange of Mn, because that is the property of the epsilon tensor. And therefore, whatever is this object T must inherit that property. And now since I'm telling you that this expression is equal to this, so let us check right-hand side expression has that antisymmetry property or not. If I exchange I and j here, I will get ji, so I exchange ij here. So what will I get here? I will get jm in, right? So left-hand side, if I write this as exchange, okay, exchange, I don't know where this is. So you exchange your ij. Ij indices in left hand side. So if I exchange here, what you will find is I will get Tji Kk Mn, and that's equal to minus of epsilon. Okay, it's epsilon Jik, epsilon Kmn, and it should be equal to minus epsilon Ijk, epsilon Kmn. This simply for this I just exchanged them, and then I use the fact that epsilon Jik is minus epsilon Ijk, and I've just written it. Okay. Now you look at your right hand side. Right hand side by definition will be, because I've just exchanged, I will get Jm delta In minus delta Jn delta In. Okay. And you can see that this is equal to this minus of delta of In delta Jn minus of delta In delta G. See, when I went in the first step, I've just exchanged. You must understand what we are doing here. Here I've just exchanged I and j because that's what I've done here. But then you can see that I can write this as minus of delta Im delta Jn plus of delta Jm delta In, because I have minus sign here, I have this. But what is this? This is nothing but this. Or in other words, you can see directly from here that if I exchange I and j, then this goes to this goes to this, and because of this extra minus sign, relative minus sign, you have an antisymmetry under exchange of indices. So at least this tells me then that this has the property that whatever expression you have on the right hand side has the correct antisymmetry property under exchange of Ij. And similarly, you can also see that it has antisymmetry property under exchange of Mn. So at least that much is satisfied. See, if I had a relative plus sign, then I wouldn't have got that antisymmetry property. Okay. Then what do you do? Okay, now I leave the next part to you as an exercise. What you do is the following. How to verify this? So what you do is use the property which I just told you earlier about the relation between epsilon and the R matrices. Okay. So try to use that relation between the epsilons and the rotation matrices and try to see if you can establish this identity. It is quite straightforward. I hope you will be able to do it. But it's useful to actually manipulate these kind of objects, or you will find that these will become actually important later on. All right. And I'll further tell you some more properties of epsilon. So this is one property of epsilon. So now instead of doing this, I'll simply say that epsilon has this property. We'll do some of these problems later when we do I'll do one tutorial sheet. At that time, we will verify some of these. Okay. Another property of epsilon which is very useful is the following: that epsilon ijk, epsilon pqr can be written in the following way: determinant of Okay, see this left-hand side is a sixth rank tensor. And when I take this determinant, I'm going to combine delta IP with delta JQ. For example, I'm saying one term, delta IP with delta JQ times delta KR. Now each of these is a second rank tensor, and I'm taking the product of 3 second rank tensors. So if I take the first two, I'm going to get a fourth rank tensor. Fourth rank tensor with the second rank tensor will give me a sixth rank tensor. And since the right hand side has a determinant now, you can also see that it is going to have antisymmetry in IJK. It will also have antisymmetry in the second one, PQR, which we have just established. That if I have a determinant of a 3 by 3 matrix or a 3 by 3 object, it's going to be exchange of, and that's what this is another identity. And okay, so here what I did was I contracted 2 indices. Now I can contract 4 indices. So I'm going to do that now. So I have IJK, IJL. So here I've multiplied 2 third rank tensors, but I've contracted now 2 indices, the first index as well as the second index. So this object now, what should it transform like?
Rank 2 covariant tensor.
Well, I've not told you what is covariant. There's nothing covariant here because I'm talking only Cartesian tensors. So there's no covariant contravariant as such right now, okay? So this will transform simply like a rank 2 tensor, and what you can see. Now this you can establish from here. Now put J and M are the same. Okay, so if you take that, J and M are the same. So you'll get IM and MN. Use that, and what you will find is that delta 2 times delta. So that follows from here. Once you use this identity, you can show this. Okay. Finally, what you do is contract all 3 indices. So I have taken a 6th rank tensor and contracted the first 2 indices, second 2 indices, and the third third pair of indices. So now this object should transform like?
Rank
Scalar.
0 tensor.
Yeah, it's a rank 0 tensor or a scalar. So what answer should I get here?
3 factorial.
3 factorial, very good. So I'll simply get 3 factorial or 6. The only is I some permutation of 1, 2, 3. If it's an even permutation, this will be plus 1 into plus 1. If it is an odd permutation, it will be like minus 1 into minus 1. And since we already saw that I only will have 6 non-zero answers, and either they are plus 1 or minus 1, so I'm simply going to get 6. So I'll put here 6, which is like 3 factorial. And what tells me is that, okay, all of why we would like to put this as 3 factorial is that later on, if you're dealing not with 3-dimensional space, but with say n-dimensional space, then what answer you will get there will be n factorial. All right. And some uses of the Levi-Civita simple is the following, or the Levi-Civita tensor. So let me consider now our usual, suppose I have 2 vectors. Let's take and use, instead of using U, I'll use A cross B. Okay. Now, this is again in 3-dimensional space. A and B are our usual 3-dimensional vectors. You know that I can construct a cross product. We talked of inner products, but I also can construct a cross product. How will this transform according to our usual geometry? A cross B? Or what kind of an object is this?
Vector.
This is also a vector, fine. So which means it should have 3 components. So how will the ith component be? Okay, so first, suppose I want the first component or the x component, maybe that way, right? What will this be given that? So let me write it like this. Suppose we'll write it as A1, A2, A3. All right, and B is B1, B2, B3. Now, if I want the first component of A cross B, what will this be by definition?
A2, B3 minus A3, B2.
A2, B3 minus A3, B2, right? Similarly, your A cross B, the second component will be what will be the second component?
A1 B3 minus A3 B1.
Think about the sign.
Negative of that.
So it will be A3 B1 minus A1 B3. Agreed? And similarly, what you will find is that A cross B with 3 will be A1 B2 minus A2. So what you can see is that if I take this in this way, that you have 3, 2, 1, 2, 3 here, and then I have here the same, but interchange of 2 and 3 with a minus sign here. Okay, and that gives me the 1. So you can see that this whole thing I can write in this very compact form, that A cross B, the ith component, can be simply written as epsilon ijk Aj Okay, so this, all these three relations can be written in this very compact. So you can 1 here. So I will get 1 here. So I will get epsilon, let I equal to 1. Okay. So then that will tell me that A cross B 1 should be equal to epsilon 1 jk Aj B. So if J and K are 2 and 3, because now J and K can only be 2 and 3, I cannot get anything else, or either it will be 2, 3 or 3, 2, nothing else can come. So if it is 2, 3, then I'll get A2, B3, and 1, 2, 3, epsilon 1, 2, 3 is plus 1, so I'll get plus sign here. If it is 3, 2, then I'll get 1, 3, 2, but then that's an odd permutation from 1 to 3, so I'll get a minus. Similarly, now if I put 2, I'll get 2 here, then I'll get 2 here, then in that case I can get 1, 2, 3. So basically you take symmetric combinations, a cyclic way, permutate, 1, 2, 3. So I put 2 here now, so I get 2, 3, 1, so I get here 3, 1. And if I take the exchange these two, I'll get a minus. So you can see that this gives you a very compact way of writing a cross product. So this is a very useful way of writing cross products, and we'll see more about this particular identity in just a little while. Okay, now I'll ask you now. You said that this transform vector A. Okay, so given two tensors of, show this explicitly. Okay, using this definition. Okay, now use this definition, verify that, or show explicitly. Now use this definition now and use the definition of how a vector transforms, that A cross B transforms like a vector. Or a tensor, I'll write it now like a tensor of rank. Sorry, rank 4. See, why we are interested in these kind of things is that here we are doing it without the usual 3-dimensional space, but later in higher order, higher applications, what you will find is that we would want to go to more general definitions of such outer products. So you will see now with two vectors, we have constructed a scalar A dot B. I've constructed this cross product, which will give you like something which transforms like a vector again. And plus we constructed an outer product, which was AIBJ, which transformed like a second rank tensor. Okay. So we will see that it will help to have this more general definitions. So now my exercise for you people is that take this definition now, using the fact that A and B transform like vectors or tensors of rank 1, and that this transforms like a tensor of rank 3, show that A cross B will transform like a tensor of rank 4. Okay. Verify. Now, before I go further, so as I said that this Levi-Civita symbol as well as the Levi-Civita tensor and the delta tensor both are very useful objects that we can use it to write expressions in a very compact way. The delta ij, for example, can be used to contract tensors. The epsilon ijk can also be used to, so for example, what we did was, this was a second rank tensor. Now from a second rank tensor, I have multiplied it with this or combined it with a third rank tensor and got a first rank tensor. That's what we've done here. So it can also be used to construct tensors of other ranks. And another very important property of these two objects is that they have the same components. The components are independent of the basis. And such kind of tensors, which are having components which are independent of basis, these are known as isotropic tensors. So these are actually examples of what are called as isotropic, or sometimes they're also called as invariant, but I prefer to write it as isotropic. I'll tell you why. So delta ij is an isotropic tensor of rank 2, while epsilon ijk is an isotropic tensor of rank 3. Isotropic because see, actually what we're doing is a rotation transformation. So basically it's like I'm saying I'm orienting my coordinate axis in a different way. And what the fact that the components are not changing, it means that independent of your orientation, the tensor remains the same. And that's what we mean by isotropic, that it doesn't matter which direction I'm looking at, I get the same answer. So both of these delta ij and epsilon ijk are examples of an isotropic tensor. Now so often in our physics applications, it's useful for us to know if some object is isotropic or not, because it will tell me whether I have rotation symmetry or not, for example. Okay, whether it will matter in which direction I'm seeing my physical quantity, whether that matters or not. So often people are interested to know whether a tensor is isotropic or not. Now let's go back again to our more general tensors. So if I have a scalar, now by scalar by definition is isotropic because we know that it doesn't depend upon which basis you are choosing. On the other hand, if I take a vector, this is an object which has three components. So I have v1, v2, v3. Now what is the most general isotropic vector? What will be the most general isotropic vector? By definition, an isotropic tensor must be something whose components look the same in any basis. So suppose this is my vector, then my vi prime should be the same as vi. Right? In that case, I will say that this vector, so suppose I have a vector v, okay, which is given like this with respect to some basis, and with respect to the other basis, if the components are the same, then I will say that my vector is an isotropic one. And this is with respect to all possible bases which are related to this basis by rotation transformations. Right? Okay, but what does this mean for all b going to b prime? Then b is a isotropic. What this means is that, but vi prime is related to this in the following way, that vi prime should be equal to rij vj, and this should be equal to vi. Agreed? So what this tells me then is that v1 prime should be equal to, so what this tells me is that v1 prime should be equal to r11 v1 plus r12 v2 plus r1 v3, and this should be the same as v1 for any arbitrary r, such that determinant of r equal to plus 1. Similarly for v2 prime. Okay, so this is like let me write it. So I write it as I1, I2 here, and I3 here, and they should be equal to Vi for I equal to 1, 2, 3. So I have three subquotients. Or in other words, your V prime should be equal to RV, and I must get a non-trivial V prime, or sorry, a non-trivial V prime or a non-trivial V, because whether you get V prime or V is the same, such that this condition is satisfied for any arbitrary R such that determinant of R equal to plus 1. Now what you can show is that this will be satisfied only if, given that your determinant of R is not 0, or determinant of R is plus 1, or even for minus 1, it will happen only in the case when V1, V2, V3 are identically equal to 0. Or in other words, an isotropic vector is only the 0 vector. So the most general isotropic vector which you can get is the 0 vector. So there's no other vector which will look the same in all directions apart from the 0 vector. or the only isotropic tensor of, so that is easy to see from your usual matrix analysis of rank 0, sorry, rank 1 is the 0 vector. And you can also see this from a geometric point of view, that if I have any arbitrary vector, which means it has some direction and some magnitude apart from the 0 vector. Now, obviously, this is going to look different if I make some arbitrary transformation. Maybe there will be some rotation transformation. Suppose I rotate around that particular direction, it will look the same. But if I rotate about any axis which is perpendicular to that, then in that case, it cannot look the same. Few minutes. And finally, when one can also show, I'm not going to show this explicitly, but it's possible to show using the same strategy that the only isotropic tensor, that the most general isotropic tensor of rank 2 is Pij equal to lambda times delta ij, where lambda is some scalar. Okay. And of rank 3 is Tijk equal to lambda times epsilon ij. So the most general non-trivial tensors which are isotropic for rank 2 and rank 3 are your delta ijk and delta ij and this epsilon ijk. Okay, so I'll continue tomorrow. And as I said, I'm going to continue after 12:15 too. Thank you. Started a little late because that there was audio, there was something with that audio we didn't figure out. इधर है ना?
ये तो कैमरा बंद हो जाएगा इससे।
उधर क्यों अच्छा?
ये माइक बंद